Welcome everybody to this event, World Health Day with Lives for Literacy. It is going to be hosted by our Director of Outreach, Yug Shah. The benefit of being with Lives for Literacy is we focus on a number of different topics in various different arenas, whether that be related to health literacy or mental health, whether that is education or human rights. Our volunteers and students and executives come from all over the world, but we are primarily based in Montreal, Canada. So just a disclaimer, today's event will be recorded. If you did not give us your consent to record or rescind your consent, we at Lives for Literacy encourage you to participate within your means and limit to the live chat function on Zoom. If you would like to remain anonymous, please forward your questions to the host via private message. And I kindly ask if those that are attending in the audience, please mute themselves if they're not a presenting speaker. And so now for World Health Day, we at Lives for Literacy are not your primary resource for information, case data, or safety guidelines regarding the current COVID-19 pandemic. For up-to-date information, we encourage you to keep in touch with the government websites, trusted public health officials, healthcare professionals, and trusted healthcare organizations in your home countries. And so just an overview of today's events. We will have a moment of reflection, a land acknowledgement, a short presentation, and then questions and closing. And so now I kindly ask everybody to provide a moment of silence for all those healthcare workers and individuals who have lost their lives during the COVID-19 pandemic. So if everybody can please take a moment of silence. And thank you. And so now at Lives for Literacy, because we are a Canadian civic social organization, we are strongly supporters of a land acknowledgement. And I'm pretty sure those abroad have not heard of a land acknowledgement. So just to give you a bit of guidance or what exactly a land acknowledgement is, it is acknowledging the lands upon which the Indigenous peoples of Canada have lived on. And because Lives for Literacy originated and is based in Montreal, Quebec, Canada, we would like to begin today's event by acknowledging the traditional lands in which we operate on. These are the unceded territories of the Kanehake, the Mohawk, a place that has long served as a site of meeting and exchange amongst nations. The reason as to why we do land acknowledgements at Lives for Literacy is to show reconciliation and support with the Indigenous peoples of Canada. So now over to the presentation of information. Yuksha, over to you.
Thank you so much, Yasmin. Thank you so much for the introduction and for the COVID disclaimer. So yes, so today is 7th April 2021, and this date of 7th April is also marked as the anniversary of founding of the WHO. That's the World Health Organization, which is commonly known around the world. It was founded on this date in 1948, and that is why every year it is celebrated as the World Health Day, and it also consists of a World Health theme, the WHO theme for the year. So for this year, we have seen that COVID-19 has highlighted that some people are able to live healthier lives, have better access to healthcare services than others. It's entirely due to conditions which they are born, grow, live, work, and also due to age. And we have seen that all over the world, some groups struggle to make ends meet with little daily income and have poorer housing conditions and education with fewer employment opportunities. With everyone experience greater gender inequality and have little or no access to safe environment, sanitation, clean water, air, food, security, and health services. This leads to unnecessary suffering, avoidable illness, and premature death states. And WHO states, and it harms the societies and economies. And this year, WHO is calling on all the leaders around the world to ensure that everyone has living and working conditions that are conducive to good health. And a campaign on this will be launched on the dedicated World Health Day 2021 web page. And this whole information and gist is also directly taken from the WHO website on the WHO World Health Day theme. And that is why this is what the WHO theme talks about in this World Health Day theme. So next. Okay, so it's a great pleasure to host this. I'm the moderator for today's panel discussion on this, and my name is Yug Shah. I'm a director of outreach at Lives for Literacy. I'm a final year MBBS student at NHLMC Ahmedabad. I'm a reader, health activist, and I'm also involved in several organizations related to healthcare. And I've also done lots of other stuff. But I'm so glad to host this panel discussion with our esteemed panelists today. Thank you. Next. So here we are today finally, and we have 4 esteemed panelists today to talk about the WHO World Health Day theme, who will discuss we have some questions related to it, and we'll also get to know what their opinions are, how can we develop a better world, and what does this WHO theme for this year talk about, so that we can all come together and bring the change as WHO advocates in this whole thing. So let's start with our first panelist. So we have our first panelist, Dr. Neeraj Mahajan. So Dr. Neeraj Mahajan is an associate professor of physiology at NSLMMC College in Ahmedabad. Has a teaching experience of over 19 years. He has completed his MBBS and holds a degree in MD and DNB in physiology, and also completed FIMA degree. He has published over 20 medical papers and has presented them at state, regional, and national level conferences. And is also co-convener at ME Unit NHLMMC, which is the medical education unit. And he loves teaching, has published a textbook for postgraduates, a textbook for MBBS and physiotherapy students, and also has a YouTube channel with over 35 videos on physiology, and which also has led to the creation of his recent mobile application for teaching physiology. We welcome you, sir. We're so glad to have you, sir. So next we have Ms. Kavya Mohan. Kavya Mohan is a budding environmental enthusiast and is a postgraduate in environment and development from Ambedkar University in Delhi. She's currently working as a project coordinator at Ashram Welfare Foundation, an NGO in Ahmedabad, Gujarat, and she's the lead in projects in agriculture and livelihoods. So her interest area also include community conservation, natural resources management, and gender. And she has also been a part of student text sessions called Entangled Natures, where she has presented her dissertation research on human values and habitat use of the Indian flying fox and sacred deer. And is also ordered for the presentation. She has previously worked in NGO based out of Nainital, Uttarakhand called Gene Campaign, and as a project lead for increasing farmers' livelihoods through pulse production. And she believes in grassroots approach for sustainable development and wishes to pursue working in civil society organizations to confirm the same. We are glad to have you.
Thank you.
The next panel. Thank you. The next panelist is Dr. Priyanka Manghani. Dr. Priyanka Manghani is a public health professional and epidemiologist, and her research interests include infectious diseases and mental health. She has been a delegate of IFMSA India to the General Assembly of International Federation of Medical Students Association, that is IFMSA, at Taiwan, and has had multiple leadership posts as student organizations such as MSA and Lexicon on online medical magazine. And she has also been a part of various health campaigns for vulnerable communities, and also has been a part of short working groups for policies on HIV/AIDS and gender-based violence. So we welcome you, Dr. Priyanka Manghani.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. And lastly, we have Ms. Nahida Akhtar. Nahida Akhtar is from Jammu and Kashmir and is presently doing her PhD from Center for International Politics, School of International Studies at Central University of Gujarat in India. And she's working on the role of women in reconstruction in Afghanistan since 2001. She has done her master's in philosophy on the impact of armed conflict in women in Kashmir, and has also worked as a field researcher in the International Project on Cultures of Governance and Conflict Resolution in Europe and India, supported by the European Union. She also has attended various national and international conferences in India. All right, so we welcome you, Ms. Nahida, ma'am.
Thank you so much.
So these are our 4 panelists, and we invite them all to actively participate in the discussion and present their views on for the upcoming questions we have related to the World Health Day theme. So here we begin with the panel discussion, and please bear in mind that actually audiences are not allowed to participate. They can just view and watch, and if they have any questions, they can directly send it to the chat to Lives for Literacy, the host, and you can all enjoy this discussion on the given questions on what we would like to interpret the World Health Day theme as. So we would start off with the first question now. Okay, so the very first and basic question of what we can see is, what does a building a fairer and healthier world mean according to you? Right, so it's just the WHO theme which I've presented of building a fairer and healthier world this time, which they have given for the theme for 2021. So this is the theme for this year, and I would like to start with Dr. Neeraj Mahajan. How do you interpret it as, sir?
I mean, what I think is that, for example, take a condition of any country. Any country will have, say, suppose we compare India with the US. Our healthcare system, it is having some plus point and you can say some minus point also. Suppose we compare with a country like US. In the India, if you want to, even a poor person, if want to be examined by a big doctor in a big city, it is not very expensive actually, and possibly he is able to get checked by even the biggest of the doctor in a day or two. In a day or two he will be able to see that doctor. That is possibly not a case in US. So somewhere we score better in terms of health facilities, say in India. But I think what fairer and healthier world mean is that any person living in the country feel that if he will be in a need, say, of healthcare, possibly he will get the best possible healthcare which is available in that country. I spent some time in the France, and my wife was deputed, and I sort of felt that point quite strong there. I mean, one who is possibly doing, say, restaurant work or say sweeper, that also they are doing by choice, and they are quite sure that if there is a need of very expensive health services, even that will be managed partly by him, partly by government. So this is may not be that good a case in country like India. We are a little bit away from that scenario when each and everybody thinks that if he will be in a need, he will get best of the treatment available in that country. So the country where this is not existing, we are not able to provide the quality health care to each and everybody. They should try to move in that direction. I mean, in this front, say European country like France may score little better than India. This is, and we should try that. This is what I interpret from this.
Thank you so much, sir. That was a really good example. Moving on, we would like Ms. Nahina Akhtar to go on with the interpretation of this question.
Yeah, thank you so much. For me, it's like the theme that has been highlighted by the WHO for building a fairer, healthier world. It's like for me, building fairer and a healthier world is that everyone must have a better living condition, as well as the economical condition, to sustain a good life and to promote the good health. People should take care of their health, and the administration should take the steps to make sure that all the people should have access to the quality healthcare system. For me, it's like that.
Okay. Thank you so much, ma'am. Moving on, we would like Ms. Kavya Mohan to go on and present her views.
Thanks for the question, Yug. I believe that to build a fairer, healthier world would mean actually to begin by recording events that are not really governed by numbers. So researchers, especially in healthcare sector, I believe is could be a little more humane in nature. So I know that if you see currently, whenever we read a newspaper, we tend to see that most of us are speaking towards numbers, say how many cases, how many number of deaths, how many new strains, etc., etc. I think instead of this, we should be focusing more on, say, how many people are treated in hospitals, how are patients being treated in a hospital, what is the relationship between healthcare providers and those who receive it. I'm not saying that these questions are not being addressed, but I think that we are sticking to the numbers too much more than we stick to these questions. So more than that, I feel that to build a fairer, healthier world, to me again would mean to have a grievance mechanism that may for discrimination or violation of the rights for both clients and for healthcare workers, and to have a healthcare system which is sort of more empathetical and culturally competent.
All right, all right. So you were bending towards the subjective interpretation of this healthcare, qualitative interpretation of this healthcare system, and not the quantitative interpretation we have of suppose current COVID scenario or any other healthcare system that goes on in the world, right?
Right.
Yes, that is actually required. That is true. And I think in the end, the patient quality and whatever treatment a patient or their family receives, and how do they feel about it, and how do they feel about the interactions with the healthcare workers and everything. And I
that
think that is
matters a
also.
lot.
Yes,
I think since we are not emphasizing on it, we are somewhere devaluing those problems. It's not significant to us. So we need to actually stick to these questions so that there is some emphasis which is put on those.
Yes, that is true. That is true. And I truly believe that with COVID and the pandemic, the whole healthcare systems are evolving to become more empathetic and more gender neutral, and also in any way trying to provide as qualitative care as possible. But it also depends on how many patients are you handling in sheer numbers versus quality care and everything. So there's also always a fight, but I think overall with better advanced healthcare systems and better technology and everything, we are reaching a much better level of quality healthcare than we were having before. Yes, definitely. Thank you so much. So moving on to the fourth panelist, Dr. Priyanka Mangani, what will be your views regarding this?
Thank you so much for the question, Yug. So according to me, the very question of a fairer and healthier world, this definition, I think, can go into pages and pages. I completely resonate with what all the other three panelists have said in their own views. Firstly, coming from a LMIC like India, I would say to build a fairer and healthier world, we need to have a higher fiscal investment of the gross domestic product into healthcare. The current rate of GDP investment in India is barely 3%, which in the current policy has been increased to 6%, which is too less considering the huge population we have of 1.3 billion. That is why when Dr. Neeraj said that France would probably score better in this, or UK would probably score, because the NHS works on funding through the tax paid by the citizens. So the amount of GDP given can only increase when firstly everyone pays tax and considers that investment as their own priority to invest in the country's infrastructure. We start very much from the basic. You cannot build a building without the concrete. So you need to start from there. And secondly, to make it fairer and healthier for everyone, we need to ensure there's something called equity. Coming from a social perspective, we always talk of equality, gender equality, but equity is a very different concept. Equity means that someone who actually needs it gets it, not everyone equally. I may not need the same amount of surgical care with someone who's living in an extremely extremely poor situation where there's no access to a doctor, or the water and sanitation services are very different. So healthcare needs and services have to be catered according to the situation, and it should be very much equity focused, and there needs to be more fiscal investment. And I think, just like how even Kavya said, that yes, numbers are important. Being an epidemiologist, I do understand the importance of quantitative numbers in healthcare, but we are very much excluding the qualitative aspect. How many surveys have you seen being done on what is the patient satisfaction level, or what are the reasons why a patient does not go to X provider to access a treatment? Is it because of the out of pocket expenditure he has to pay? Is it because he has to travel too far? Say I stay somewhere from where reaching a primary care physician is 3 hours. If I'm staying in a village, am I not going to access a treatment because of that travel? Is there no health center within 1 kilometer of my vicinity? Those kind of surveys need to be done. That mapping needs to be done, and then a policy needs to be created. So in my term, according to me, a fairer and healthier world would, in a simple line, mean a world where there is more fiscal investment into healthcare. There is equity of healthcare for everyone. For people of all income disparities, there should be no discrimination, or there should not be any hindrance of access to healthcare services irrespective of someone's socioeconomic classification, which is a huge hurdle in many countries, not just India. There are, even in developed countries, you will find migrated population who may not access a service because huge out-of-pocket expenditure. It's not like any country is perfect, but we need to take steps to address that. So according to me, that those are few of the components which should be addressed to build a fairer and healthier world.
Yes, absolutely, absolutely. That's, I think every person who has seen this currently has experienced this and will definitely agree with what you are saying right now. And that is why we have identified the problem of why we need this theme and what does this theme reflect with this. And I very much agree with what you said about the GDP investment the India needs to make. And I think not India, but I think every country spends less than 10% of their whole expenditure on of their whole total budget on this healthcare, which is very less compared to what the situation are we in. This the huge pandemic and everyone's life going haphazard. So definitely that is one of the very things I actually interpret. And one more thing that we talked about the qualitative healthcare, as Kavya ma'am said, and everything that's involved with it. That how are we going to build this fairer, healthier world? And also, actually, I also, when I read the theme for this year, I was a little bit confused, actually, honestly, because I one of my friends told me that this theme, fairer, healthier world, like what does fairer actually mean and everything. And that is why I think as everyone talked about, that equity for people and providing equal care for also providing care for those who essentially need it, and also to provide quality care to them who need this need the healthcare systems, so that everyone, so the whole healthcare system of whole healthcare standards and level of the whole country, the whole region, the whole nation can be elevated with that, and then we can reach to better levels of healthcare around the world. And that is truly said as per everyone's discussion. And I would also advise the panelists to also share their personal experiences if they have any of the coming questions, or in the whatever work they have done, whatever systems we have seen in this year, especially in the pandemic year. Before that is that, and that would really be fun to know what their experiences have been, what they have heard from the people around, what the people think about this, etc. And that is all for this question, I think. So let's move on. After identifying the problem, let's move on to the next question, second question, which we will discuss about the solutions to the problems we have discussed. So this question talks about the solutions to the problems we have discussed, like how do we reach out to inaccessible, highly difficult areas, and also to masses of people who are unavailable to the reach of appropriate healthcare. So as we discussed earlier, that some people need healthcare, but they're not able to approach them. We are not able to reach out to them and everything. And this is very important for giving fairer and healthier, giving the equity and equality to healthcare around the world. So inaccessible and highly difficult areas like maybe hilly terrains or some war-stricken areas, etc. And to people who are unavailable, like suppose some of the people who are in distraught communities and different areas, who have not been educated and have lived their lives differently. How do we reach out to them to provide the healthcare that they need and to address their health problems? So this is what the question talks about. So I would like Ms. Kavya Mohan to go on with the answer of what she thinks can be done for this.
Thanks, Yog. I think here I would like to begin by a personal experience. So this question actually reminds me of my days in Uttarakhand when I was working there with an NGO. And this was located in the middle of a village, and it was completely isolated. So I actually remember getting this deep scratch by my pet dog, and which was not yet vaccinated at that point of time. And I had to figure out a way, considering how fatal rabies can be. I wanted to get my vaccine shots, and I figured out the nearest center where I could get the shots is at least 25 to 30 kilometers away from where I was living. So since I was in this position where I had my own scooty, and I could just go and get the vaccine shots, and I had that kind of money. The vaccine shot cost around 450 to 500 bucks at that time, and since I had that, I was able to easily get it. But I was very curious to know how the locals would deal with this. So I had a conversation with a couple of localites over there, and I figured out that most of them had actually got bitten by dogs, considering that area was surrounded by these huge bhutia dogs. And but you know, they never in their life they got these vaccine shots. And there were some other, you know, they also tend to share with me about their relatives and neighbors who died a week or so after getting bitten by a dog. So we really, so two alarming things that I found in this situation, that a, obviously there was the healthcare facility was not accessible to them. B, these things were not being properly documented. You know how the deaths are happening. In, I think, 2013's data of Uttarakhand only reports 2 deaths due to rabies, which is highly unlikely. So I think that you know, such falsified documentation. So a, I think, is proper documentation in any specific region about such cases, deaths or diseases, is very important, so that that region specifically gets identified. And like Priyanka mentioned, as she mentioned about lower percentage of GDP being spent, I think that plays a very important role. Again, support from the government. And thirdly, I think even if we have funds from the government, even if more GDP is contributed, who is willing to go to these spaces and work in isolated regions? So the current ban on NGOs and civil society organizations is, I think, not very satisfactory. In fact, we should identify such you know, organizations, CSOs, which would willingly go and work in these grassroots levels. So I think these three aspects play a very important role. This is something we need to really work right now to reach out to the masses in highly difficult areas.
Yeah, that is absolutely true. And it's great to hear a personal experience so that we can also relate. And I think everyone has experienced such. I've seen the disparity in healthcare in different areas around in the places they've been to. That is absolutely
right.
Thank you so much, ma'am. Moving on, I would like Dr. Priyanka to present her views.
Thank you so much, Yug, for the question. So when you say something like inaccessible, just like, you know, how Kavya started with an example, she had to travel 25 to 30 kilometers. Now, remember that she said she had a scooty and she could afford to pay 500 rupees, which was affordable to her. The same thing may not be affordable to a day laborer who, even if he can manage to travel 25 to 30 kilometers, his entire day salary will go if he travels that much. So even if he has a mode of communication to go to that place, he may not be able to let go the entire day's salary. So firstly, how do you reach out to these areas? Now there's no defined protocol. You go and search any research paper, there's no defined protocol. There are, I think, a series of trial and error methods which we need to start with. The first being something called task shifting. Now in a country like India with such a huge population, we do have a lot of doctors now, but the problem is many of those well qualified trained doctors are concentrated heavily in urban areas. The same is not in rural areas, the same is not in hard to reach villages, the same is not in hilly terrains or areas where, you know, probably there are Naxalites. The same can't be said of there. There are very few doctors who are willing to go and work in the areas, and there are not even many medical colleges accessible to those areas if you even look at the ratio of medical colleges. So herein we, I think, an important aspect of task shifting comes in, wherein it may not be possible through a task shifting to train someone to give the most possible highly comprehensive surgical care, but there could be a task shifting to teach probably a nurse or a lay health worker to give essential primary care, the very basic care which a person gets, because of which he does not land up in a state of needing a higher service because he was not given the first care. It is like if you have fever and you do not take paracetamol that time, you take it after 5 days, when you land up into more severe complications, that's when you need to get admitted into an ICU. So if basic essential care can be given through a possible aspect of task shifting. And what do you mean by task shifting is that in areas where trained qualified physicians are not available, trained nurses to give essential medical care, trained health workers. There's a concept called ASHA workers in India, which is an accredited social health activist. She's barely an 8th or 10th pass, but she knows how to go to a house, do a syndromic surveillance. She has a form in which she marks, does the person have fever? Does the person have this? She knows what basic antibiotics to give. She's given a first aid kit. So there needs to be training of these kind of professionals. There needs to be training of nurses to deliver basic essential healthcare. These kind of task shifting training needs to be done. I know it may go into a lot of ethical debates on how right it is and what are the limitations of this aspect. We've had various debates on the same, but I completely understand it may not be possible for higher services like surgical care where you need a trained surgeon, but basic essential medication, essential primary healthcare can be delivered through task shifting. The example I'd like to share is through task shifting done in mental health. There's an organization called Sangat, and they're working for the same in Goa, where they're delivering basic essential mental health care to the community through community health workers. You don't need a psychiatrist all the time. And at places where there is no psychiatry unit, they have also come in with telepsychiatry. There's a project called Impact India, where they have once a week or twice a week a telepsychiatry session, and they have counselors who are following up with these patients who need medications for mental health care on a very daily basis. So those simple kind of interventions, if taken over, especially in these areas, can really have a huge impact. And like Kavya also mentioned, we do need to give support to community-based organizations, civil society organizations to work in these areas. With the current crux of GDP we are investing, it may not be possible to reach to all these areas. That's why we need to motivate international humanitarian organizations, whether it's an MSF, UNICEF, and all other even local NGOs. There are a lot of NGOs working in all these health conditions. We need to increase the funding for such organizations so that they can help mitigate the burden and work together with the government to address this shortage.
Yes, yes, that is absolutely true. And you being an epidemiologist and a public health professional, I think you have seen a lot of what the government is doing and what how the people are responding. Are we actually getting the goals that we desire? And that is actually true. And I'm an MBBS student myself, and I've just passed my PSN exam. I've just seen this whole system of ASHA workers, Anganwadi workers, and I actually have been so proud that actually India is just trying, and as you told that they're just trying. India, and I think everywhere around the world, even from Africa to other countries of Asia to South America, everywhere the governments have addressed this problem, and they're trying their way with trial and error methods of what's possible. And in every way, I think that we've just come to this one main conclusion, that you need basic healthcare available, primary healthcare, as they say, available for everyone. Plus, what I've read also in the PSN textbooks is about the referral units and how we can give referrals to the higher centers and everything. But for that also, we just need to do the primary healthcare at a very, very basic level, as you've talked about. And I think that everyone can agree with that of what you've actually addressed about this situation. Thank you so much. Anything else you would like to add regarding the like unability to reach the healthcare? Now, like, you talked about the difficult areas and everything. So any other ideas you have seen upcoming other than these?
So the government did try to take certain measures. I remember the NHM coming up, with advertisements for medical officers, nurses to work in rural areas with a very lucrative salary also. They try to address the financial standpoint also. But still many qualified healthcare professionals, whether doctors, nurses, etc., are not willing to go to such areas because the situations probably where they have been educated, where they have been worked, and the situation in those areas are very different. So I think measures need to be taken on how we can even tackle these issues. It's like if tomorrow I'm sent to a conflict zone, it may not be very easy for me to adjust despite whatever remuneration is given to me. That is a different concept. So I think how we can work in these tough areas as well, working along with conflict zones, whether it's Naxalites or areas where we've had issues with the local people. I think those things need to come to a mutual consensus, and the safety and essential needs of the health workers over there need to be taken care of. I think if that is taken care of more than the remuneration, I think that could also lead to a change in the attitude of people wanting to go to such areas.
Yes, that is absolutely true. Thank you so much. Thank you. So thank you so much, Dr. Priyanka. We'll move on with the next panelist, Dr. Neeraj. What would be your take on this question?
I mean, the point are mostly covered, that there should be task shifting, and it's not that government has not tried. I mean, I was completed my MBBS approximately 25 years back. Those time there were only government medical colleges, so number of doctor output was so limited that possibly each and every, you can say, area of work or city was actually available for MBBS. He would have joined anywhere, any place. So I decided that I am sharing my personal experience, that I should go to the area where I am needed most. So I worked for 2 years in a very, very remote village. I enjoyed the stay there, but down the line, I felt that at the PSC, that possibly these hospitals are not, at that time, things may be different now, not that empowered. I mean, many PSCs, they are made little bit away from the village, and that affect the OPD number and all that. And down the line, I realized that I'm not making that difference I would like to make. It was never a matter of money, but then because of some reasons and because of my academic interest, I shifted to academic side, and eventually I worked in a big city. And I, all throughout my career, I always realized that I'm not working in a place where I should be working, where the doctor is needed most. So anyway, I think what now it is being said, or what we can do possibly apart from task shifting, we should also measure quality of that shifting. I mean, if you are making the PSCs, you are making the CSCs, and it is not making too much of a difference, then impact will be limited. For example, nowadays, if you see, a lot of medical colleges are being decided to make in the most remote areas, because possibly PSC and CSCs, they may not be making that much difference they are supposed to make. So that is a good move. Then again, the point may come is that suppose you open a medical colleges and majority of the clinician, majority of the professors, they have living in a big city and going there sort of part time, up down and all that, and trying to live there as minimum as possible. Then again, it will affect the quality. So we should look, we should make a task shifting, what is being said, that is important, but it should have quality and impact. That is important. Now, with technology has come in, it can also make a huge difference, because even in the most remote area, we are having technology, and down the line, it can make a huge difference. That is one thing that we can think of adding or doing or focus in this direction. Second is we are having the huge young manpower, and we are having a lot of youngsters who are not basically after money. I meet so many young brains and budding MBBS in the medical colleges, and I realize that so many are not so much after money. That possibly used to happen in our days. Majority were for a success. Now so many youngsters, they want to make an impact, so they can be mobilized. And always government try to pay good in the remote areas, but I think government should pay best one who is working well in the remote area. Those salaries should be best in case he or she is making a difference. I can give an example. There is a medical college in Gujarat, possibly at the most remote place, Karamsad, away from Anand. And this medical college has been established approximately 20 years back. And maybe academically, as far as treatment point of view, possibly it is one of the best in Gujarat. And if you compare their salaries of professors with government salary, they have made a rule that salary there of a professor or clinician, it will be about 20% more whatever government is paying. And this is good enough. Otherwise, the rules are very strict. You have to live there. There is no other way. Even holidays are very limited. But just I think this decision has made such a difference that best quality clinician and professors you can find there, and it has made a huge difference in that area. So this way we can do, maybe mobilizing manpower, motivating young people, use of technology, and moving the sources as near as possible in this area, but checking out the quality also. This I think.
That is totally true, and it's great to hear the example of Karamsad Medical College. And me also being a part of Gujarat, you definitely know about it, and how different setting up medical colleges across India has changed the scenario. Plus, they've also mobilized the manpower to hard to reach areas. And I think with NGOs coming up with more and more foundations, there's also availability of more and more young people and their enthusiasm actually to reach out to hard to reach areas and to to reach and actually serve the people and rather running after money. And that is where actually, because I think the biggest challenges in healthcare lie there, where it is hard to reach areas where the people are where there's unavailability of maybe equipment systems, etc. And some or the other way, we are all these young people love challenges, and by capitalizing on them, we are actually making a better healthcare system in this way. And that is totally what I agree with Dr. Neeraj's point. And moving on to our last panelist, Ms. Nahida, what would you like to say?
Yeah, actually, thank you, Yug. Everyone talked about their own experiences. Let me share my experience as well. Actually, I was working with an NGO, Jagori, in Delhi. So we went to some outskirts of Delhi. There was a slum. So we went there, and there was like the women. We were working on women issues over there. So domestic violence, we were like working on that thing. I was doing my internship with that Jagori, and we went there, and like there was a girl who was like she was on her periods, and she said like she don't know anything about the sanitary pads and all. They never like they never got the chance to get these sanitary pads. In fact, they were costly, and they were like, at least we should do something, like we should provide such things. Government should provide such things that sanitary pads should be like be free, at least for the women health. And we should be like at least we should provide a safety measures for such slum people who are not getting such adequate facilities from the government or whatever it is. But at least we should provide, we government should take actions regarding that thing. Talking about that building, we should like build empowering the primary healthcare system. As per the review of global evidence shared by the WHO India country office, that non-physicians provides when well skilled, supportive, and supervised can deliver good quality health for the people who have limited access to the healthcare. And the training of rural healthcare professionals, like global evidences suggest that such a case is effectively provided by the workforce, that is doctors and nurses, who are trained to practice comprehensive health care and are mentally prepared to offer a full service to the masses who are unable to reach the appropriate health care. So we should like train such people. As discussed by everyone, we should at least train people who are not like physicians, who are like nurses, asha workers, who can get like to those places uh, that are not well they are not well they don't go like they don't get the proper healthcare system. So they should go there and work there. And for that matter, we should government should take an action against that thing. Thank you.
Yes, that is true. And I just wanted to ask Nahida ma'am that
Yes.
Since you are from Jammu and Kashmir, would you like to add anything else on based on that? Or if you have been and you have seen any of your friends, relative, family, that how is the health system in Jammu and Kashmir? Because it's war torn, there's there was internet ban, this, that, and it's such chaos in Jammu and Kashmir at that point.
Yeah,
And
I know. Yeah. Actually, the being a Kashmiri, being like I'm from the main town, I'm from the district Pulwama, and there like the far-flung areas that are where the Gujars and Bakarwals are residing, they have limited access to the healthcare system. They have to walk so many kilometers to get like the pregnant lady. It takes like 3 or 4 hours or so many hours to reach the basic healthcare system, like basic healthcare center, where they are like they don't have the basic roads that hinder them to reach their government or whatever it is private healthcare center. it's really for the far-flung areas, it's really very difficult to reach the healthcare centers.
Yes, that is actually nice to hear, and I think that we can definitely improve in such areas, and those are the areas that actually need the maximum attention of the government. Because even in urban areas, maybe you can go to private colleges and hospitals,
Yeah,
you can get
exactly.
all the medical care. But in states like Jammu and Kashmir, suppose if there's a pregnant woman who can't get a proper delivery done, and she has to go 3 to 4 hours to reach out to an area, it's very hard for that situation. So that is why we
It
actually
takes
need.
a lot. Even in fact, she's in labor, and her like family members has to carry her to the primary health center, walking so long, and they don't have the proper roads over there.
That is actually true. And then totally those areas need to be addressed and talked about. So that's why we will move on to the next question and talk about what are the possible solutions are
Yug,
there. Yes, yes.
I would actually like to add to what Nahida
Yes,
said,
yes.
one of the experiences. I think
Yes.
that was very interesting, whatever she did in Jaguri. In fact, I personally had experience similar to this in Uttarakhand, where, I had this Didi who would come and help me with the dish, do the dishes and clean the house. And she had a daughter who was around 18. Okay. And when they came, we had this conversation about menstruation and stuff, where they shared with me, which was very shocking to me, that the children are not allowed to share these things with their mother, because the mothers are totally averted, and they will completely disown their children. They would not want to hear that. So I think that even if we are sending a lot of facilities or other, maybe a lot of resources or manpower to these areas, it is very complicated to transform their mindset from what it is. Maybe we can provide them with better facilities like sanitary napkins or whatever, but to change their mindset of stigmatizing this thing, that will take a long time, I think, and that's still
Yes,
question.
yes. Actually, yes. In relation to women empowerment, women healthcare, everything, a lot needs to be focused upon, especially in countries like India, where there's gender gap, there's need for women empowerment and everything. But I think slowly things are coming up, and with what we have talked about, and maybe with the coming years, and with suppose empowerment of suppose ASHA workers or Anganwadi workers who
Right.
are female, who can talk about this with greater
Right.
awareness. I think changes can totally come about and will come
Right.
about with more and more education spreading out across the world. And definitely that's a good point, that even the healthcare, even the mentality and the perception we have regarding some particular health habit, and suppose some health some daily health thing, or something or other process that we have, that should definitely needs to be changed. Yes, that is
Correct.
totally true. So after that we'll move on to the third question
You
now.
go 1 minute. Let
Yes.
me
Okay.
add one more thing. When we went to that slum area, and we asked them about the menstruation, and they were like, नहीं नहीं हमें ये बात नहीं करनी है, इस बारे में बात नहीं करनी है हमें. And they literally ignored that thing. उन लोगों ने बिल्कुल भी बात नहीं करी उस बारे में. They said कि we are not going to talk about it.
Even when you're being a female, right? Like
Yeah, of
women
course.
talking to women, they don't want that only. Then it's
And
Exactly.
that
That's what
too,
I was trying to address.
and that too, elderly women, they restricted them. You don't have to talk about these things. You don't have to talk these things publicly, and you should not exchange such things with the other people whom you don't know.
Exactly. So even if we send a couple of ASHA workers to them, how do you think that we'll be able to tackle this? That's extremely questionable and challenging, I think.
I'd,
that
I'd,
is that is
I'd also,
actually.
yes,
Yes,
I'd
yes.
also like to just shortly add on that. I know we have a lot of more questions ahead. Just like, how both Kavya and Nasreen put it across, that it's very much a taboo, I think, in many communities all across not just in India, even across the globe, where menstruation or even talking about sexual and reproductive health is a very big taboo. I think the list can just go on if we have an extended webinar. So I think that taboo needs to be broken, which is not possible directly to intervene in one day. I cannot go to a village and directly start with a play card. Okay, this is the female reproductive system. This is how menstruation happens. So it needs to start very much at an immediate community behavioral level, and breaking that taboo itself will take many years. After that, we go to the next step of improving their literacy about menstruation, and slowly we get them to access services. So directly in one chain, everything may not be possible. So that social concept around menstruation needs to be addressed first. I think even what Kavya and Nahida was saying earlier, that the social stigma is so much, so we don't address the social stigma. We directly come up with huge play cards. Okay, X means this, Y means this. That's not how a community who may not have a formative education understands. And understanding that, and probably addressing that, and probably talking to these people slowly through focus group discussions, sending someone from their community itself. We have to first empower. If I go tomorrow to some village, they don't know me. Even if I'm an ASHA worker, they're not going to rely on me. We have to get into confidence someone from that community, equip her with the essential knowledge, break the taboo with her, and then slowly that person can go and motivate that
So
community.
we need to
Any person will first rely on that community person. So that's where the first step needs to be taken, and not directly with huge play cards that X means Y, these are the preventive factors, use these sanitary napkins, or use this. So first we need to start with that by getting people from the community, whether it's a sarpanch, whether it's the village leader, or anyone else who that community can trust on. That is the even the reason why an ASHA worker should be from the community, because that is the only reason why people will probably agree to take a medication. In our country especially, we don't always think that something given free is good. I mean, you may just go to someone and they may reject it if it's free, ki, ye chori ka maal hai. That's exactly how some people think. So we need to start with the community, and that's when we do that, we can only then address the other things. So I think the conversation needs to start there.
Yes, that is true. And actually mobilizing local leaders, and that's mobilizing local leaders actually helps create the whole chain, and that's how the chain
Right.
starts. And that is because people actually believe in them and whatever they say, and that is actually very true. All right, so with we'll continue the discussion with the next question because the theme remains the same. So I'm not trying to interrupt the discussion, but we also have some time constraints and everything. But yes, we'll go on with the third question now. All right. So this is the question of with a broad regard to how to with broad regard to how to bring the change and how to bring out solutions. So that is what we talked about. We need to ensure equitable, accessible, and quality healthcare as a society. Now, how can we do that? Other than the so I think we've talked about a lot in this. But if you have seen any other ideas, or if you have seen any other innovations or been a part of it, then you can actually talk about this in this quality aspect. And I would like to start with by Dr. Priyanka. Yes.
Thank you very much, Yog. I think this question is an amalgamation of the first two aspects we have discussed. I think the flow is very much relevant, and how can we ensure equitable access and quality healthcare in the current times? Now, this is a very debatable question, and I would like to put a disclaimer here. The views expressed are my own. I do not have any conflict of interest with someone who may agree or disagree, etc. So, if you look at our current system, we are in the second wave of the COVID-19 pandemic. It's been almost close to 2 years. And the entire focus has been on COVID-19. Every health worker, no matter what his or her specialty, whether it's OBG or psychiatry, is put into COVID. All the hospitals which were, probably you could go and access all services, whether it's gynac, whether it's psychiatry, general medicine, are now entirely COVID hospitals. So I think that entire focus on COVID is essential at a point, but it cannot be at the cost of completely ignoring other health services. So I understand last year when the pandemic just suddenly came like a curveball, we had no clue what to do, and everything is suddenly shut. Elective surgeries were postponed. But now, 2 years, almost close to 2 years into the pandemic, I think there needs to be some policy, or there needs to be a bit of understanding that how can we not impact other essential healthcare services at the cost of COVID-19? If in an area there are 5 hospitals, all the 5 hospitals cannot be COVID-19 hospitals. There needs to be one hospital which caters to essential healthcare. If a pregnant woman wants to go and visit her gynac, she should not be prohibited because all the hospitals are not willing to take her in. Or if a person wants to go and probably show an orthopedic surgeon that he's having some ligament injury, all the 4 hospitals are again COVID. That cannot work. So I think there need to be designated centers for COVID. There needs to be a bed allocation, and at the same time there needs to be designated centers which will not deal with COVID, which will just cater to the other health needs. That demarcation has not come in yet, and where we have seen last year with all the medical college hospitals, all the centers just shutting store to everything else, and just like we are a COVID center, we are shifting the OPD here. That is not a sustainable system. While that is the need of the hour, it's not a sustainable system. COVID is going to continue for how many number of years. There have been endless papers and endless reviews. So I think that there's no guarantee, but I think there needs to be a designated center for these services. And this is not again going to happen in a day, because we don't have a special task force to work on COVID. If you see all the residents who joined PG in the year of COVID-19, the person may have signed up for a post graduation to become a surgeon, but he's sitting on COVID duty. So it's a loss of his training also in the years. So there needs to be designated specialists and medical officers, given we are 2 years in the pandemic, just handling COVID, and the rest of the task force needs to be put into the services. If the person is a gynac, if the person is a psychiatrist, they need to deal with that OPD. Or if there is a limitation that, okay, we need this person to come certain hours into a COVID duty also, maybe 3 days they visit their specialty, the rest 3 days they work on COVID. And in between, there needs to be a quarantining also because of the exposure. So those kind of aspects need to be worked on. That is the one immediate solution I can see to address this issue. In long term, thinking about it, it's going to require a lot of mapping, a lot of research into what policies we could have, and there needs to be more emergency preparedness. COVID is just the start. Tomorrow, if we have another pandemic which comes from a zoonotic origin, we have no idea how to deal with it. So there needs to be emergency preparedness. If pandemic 2.3, pandemic 2.4 lands up, what do? We cannot just shut stores. Shutting down, lockdown works for a short amount of time, but it can't continue into extended periods of time. So that emergency preparedness needs to be there, especially for a country like India.
And one more thing, as I talked about, so actually in current times, if COVID becomes the only focus of healthcare, actually that can lead to sidelining or maybe inattention to the things and focus that are actually also essential to overall healthcare system, like pregnancy, maternal and child health, even suppose like fracture and everything. So what will happen that if I fall down today, if there's an elderly person in my home who falls down and gets a fracture neck femur, but the person feels that I don't want to go to hospital because this COVID hospital, because I'll get COVID already with a fracture, and then I can definitely die with such a situation. So I don't want to do that. And the person continues to limp, and so till waiting that the fracture or whatever injury or complication they might have will heal on itself. And even in long chronic diseases like diabetes or hypertension, etc., maybe you start developing a complication like retinopathy, neuropathy, you do not know that, and then some or the other thing might happen, and you are just leading to waiting for COVID to settle down and everything. And with loss of attention to other activities, it might actually affect everything that we have seen and the whole healthcare system in overall. It can lead to more and more complications, and it can also reduce the accessibility. That's what we have seen, that it can reduce accessibility of the healthcare that's available for the people if such a COVID situation comes up. And that's what I just wanted to give an example to what you said.
Definitely.
So yeah,
I agree with that, and it won't be long enough until the other health indicators which were faring better because of improved vaccination or anything will also start coming down, because probably a state which was not having the best health infrastructure, because a nurse who used to give vaccination there, the OPD shut down and the children are not getting the vaccine, you may have a resurgence of all the vaccine preventable diseases, because already we don't have too many people who agree to take vaccines in India, given the experience even with the COVID vaccine. So if you shut all of that, all those diseases are going to come back. So don't wait for more pandemics and more re-emerging diseases to come back.
Yes, that is actually true. That's a very good focus point you've talked about today in this question. So I would just like to move on and go on with the next panelist. What would you like to say about Dr. Neeraj? Dr. Neeraj Mahajan, sir.
Well, my views are a bit mixed because of my own experience. because I am working in SVP hospital, which was one of the earliest and biggest hospital, which is designated as a COVID hospital very initially. I remember that on 22 March, there was a lockdown, and on 23 March, I received a phone call from my college that we are making a rapid response team and you are supposed to lead it. Although I work in a preclinical subject, which is predominantly deals with teaching. But then, and then I was a bit not worried for myself, but worried for work. I will able to deliver or not. But then thinking that he is a sincere person, I was asked to lead. And then we were doing the contact tracing and all those things. And I observed what a fearful atmosphere that was. I mean, the whole scenario was that just you touch your face and you will get the COVID, and it is very difficult to survive. And this news, that news, mask need to be wear or not. So it was really a fearful situation. And we were thinking that if we survive, we will be lucky. So that time I really defend the move that has been taken, and it has been given the top priority. What else the government could have done? But then down the line, now we know more the things that it is not spread that much by fomite, that you touch this, that you touch that, and immediately you will get the COVID. And we are having some sort of medication, vaccination and all that. And now at this point of time, I agree that all the diseases, other parameters, they should also be given their due emphasis. But as far as initial response is concerned, possibly I will not say that our decisions were wrong. It was something very big, something quite unpredictable, and we were not knowing the things. So that way the government went after it. But now, of course, everything should be seen in that perspective, that overall each and every disease has its impact, and that way we should deal it. And COVID also is possibly here to stay. So we may say the population that keep living with it and deal with it as well as other diseases. One more point I always think is that when we talk so much about it, quality and all that, I always felt is that there is a sort of mistrust between population and healthcare workers. And whatever facilities are there in the country, they are not best utilized. I mean, general population doubt a lot to doctors and others, like all are greedy. A doctor says that there are only few doctors which are greedy. Majority of the doctors are very good. They are noble. But so there is a huge mistrust and you can say divide. And that also need to be addressed. And suppose there are only few doctors, I agree. Majority of the doctors are good or healthcare professionals are good. They want to do a good and clean practice. But what the doctors are doing for remaining these greedy 5%? Because they are spoiling the whole game. Possibly they are doing nothing. So doctor need to do something in that direction also. So even if we create so many things, if there is mistrust, it will not be best utilized. So that is also one thing we should really focus. And a lot of doctors and a lot of paramedicals, they should enter into the diverse field, maybe in the politics, maybe in the media, so that the real picture can be put forward.
Yeah, that is actually very
I would like to add my point here. Yeah,
yes,
can you hear me? I would like to add a point here. I think what Dr. Neeraj said is absolutely right. But I think this perspective, you mentioned about the relationship between healthcare providers and those who receive it. I think that it just does not come from, we don't think that you're greedy or anything, but there are people who have had experiences of doctors stigmatizing them. Say my friend who suffers from PCOD, she once went to this gyna, and she was asked, she obviously had those symptoms of being very hairy and all. So this doctor sort of asked her this question, that are you even a female? So that this is not something that we accept, that doctors, this is not the kind of attitude that we sort of expect. So I think this is also an aspect that is creating a lot of insecurity among others, right? Even if, say, a teenager wants to check on her again the menstrual cycle and stuff, if she goes to a gyna, she is being stigmatized. There are cases in which they are being stigmatized. So I think that is one reason, one aspect to look into as well.
Yes. So regarding that, I would just like to add that what actually how we can bring about that thing which you talked about. So that is through more and more quality healthcare, and that is training of the MBBS doctors for ethical, professional, and how to communicate. That will not hurt anyone's sentiment and everything. And I think with the current batches that we are getting in MBBS, and me being an MBBS student, I think we have become more sensitive, more empathetic to how the patient approaches us, and not just based on any of the health parameters that he or she has. And I think Dr. Neeraj is a part of CME, as we've seen in the profile. And Dr. Neeraj can explain that with what he has seen with the first and second year students with the new batch, and how they train for ethical, professional, and communication aspects of being a doctor. And any. Yes.
Let me add one more thing over there. Like I had a friend. She was also having some problem with, like, she was not her periods were irregular. Okay. And she went to a gynae, and she had some PCOD problem. So she went to gynae, and she told her that I don't got my period since 2 months. And she was like, are you married? She said, no, I'm not married. She literally asked her, have you sex with your partner? And it was like, no. And she literally, she got humiliated over there. And that was a problem, just because she was having the PCOD, and she had the irregular these periods, and she was in front of her mother. The gynae asked her this question. And the majority of the people in India, especially in Kashmir, are conservative. Like they are.
Yes.
That was the case.
So yes. So
actually, I will.
Yes. Go on.
I will add a point here. I totally agree what is being said. In fact, there are three aspects of medical teaching or becoming a doctor. One is theory part or diagnosis part. One is skill part, you can say surgical part. And one is this ethical part and how to communicate with the patient. You may totally surprised to notice that except since last 3-4 years in India, no doctor has been taught a word about how to communicate and ethical aspect. This was totally ignored. Unlike USA and Europe, where it has been there since many, many years, it was never ever taught. For example, when I was a student, it was not at all, it was unthinkable that this will be taught. And now we are teaching it very, very strongly. I am also a part at national level to design the course and to teach the course. And we could start very late. Since last 2 batches, we are training the teachers first. We are training the teachers since last 4-5 years. And now we are in a position that we have implement, we call it EdCom, how to talk and what are the ethical aspect, professional aspect of this science. Because 80% problems are basically because of communication gap. Basically because doctor has not talked well, not picked up the words well. And what a difference it is making. Because there are young dynamic minds, when they come across, when this is one scenario, this is other scenario, look, the treatment is same, but how this doctor is talking, how this doctor is talking, and see the impact. It is a bad news, but in one scenario, still patient is saying, thank you doctor, thank you for saying the truth. On other, violence is happening. This is the difference it is making. So just 2 years, what a difference it is making. Of course, we are very late in starting that, but ultimately it has been started. And down the line, we should see a huge difference in this area also. Otherwise, look, as far as diagnosis is concerned, as far as skill is concerned, the best doctors, one of the best doctors in the world are Indians. In the US also, US का एक part है जहाँ पे वो सारे migrant को भगाना चाहते हैं, because they are not getting the good jobs. एंड सैलरीज, पर वो बोलते हैं हमारे डॉक्टर को, इंडियन डॉक्टर को टच मत करना, वो बहुत अच्छा है. सो
Very much
आई
agree with
होप
that.
इसमें भी हम डाउन द लाइन वन ऑफ द बेस्ट हो जाएंगे.
Yes. In terms of
Uh,
skill, I definitely will agree
let
that because we've seen
yeah.
all the possible diseases which probably a developing country may not have experienced, and definitely in terms of skill, our healthcare professionals are very well competent. The communication part is something where there have
Yes,
been various
yes,
stories of
yes,
that,
definitely lacking.
especially by
Yes,
gynacs. I think that is a well-known theory, and even
or
towards say the LGBT community. Sometimes we don't know how to address a transgender person, and in fact not many people may even know what is a transgender. So
Transgender.
these slowly these interventions have been, like sir said, he is part of a team. These ethical point to point communication sessions are being taken. And just to even share a similar example, like in Bombay we had a training for medical doctors on how to communicate with LGBT patients, to first to explain them what is an LGBT person, that homosexuality is not a crime, what is a transgender. So these things are not taught in sexual medicine or in gynecology very often in a medical school. So these kind of CMEs are slowly coming up, and change will happen, but it may not happen in a day, but definitely there are steps being taken towards that.
yes, yes, definitely.
Actually, I would like to add one more thing. I'm with the Gandhinagar Queer Pride team. I'm with that LGBT here, and they were literally once one of the LGBT community guy. Got some. He got sick. Okay, we went to a doctor, and we were with him, and we went to a doctor, and he he said all. First of all, he asked him whether you are a woman or man. It was matlab, it was literally shocking for us, having a respect on a respected position, having on such a position, you are not ought to ask such question.
And
That is
actually, one more thing. Yes, yes, that is what we talked about. And suppose I'll just tell my example and what the scenario my current MBBS level is. So with MSI and everything, other organizations we've come up. I think change is slowly coming up. We are, I think, as a batch and as a whole of India, if I currently see, I think this whole generation of the doctor that we're gonna produce in the future, we are way much more sensitive with the LGBTQI community because awareness has been spread more. There's been more awareness regarding communications. We have identified that communication has been the main problem in a lot of situations, and people, it can also affect, it can also lead to judgmental cues, etc., which the patient may not like. And that is even I myself have learned about this in particular CMEs, in particular webinars, etc., in the past 1 and 2 years, etc. I'll definitely from the side being a member, so definitely changes around, and you'll not find there's very less chances of being judged or being so the lack of communication or miscommunication between the patient and the doctor in the future healthcare. I definitely can promise you on that with the future, being a young medical student. And also on that note, that I have also conducted an event with Gandhinagar Queer Pride just in December on World AIDS Day, along with Rahul from your Gandhinagar Queer Pride, I think. We had
I'm
Rahul.
one of them. I'm one of
Yeah.
the team.
Yeah, he was one of the team members from Gandhinagar Queer Pride. So I had a collaboration with him on HIV and everything. And we had this wonderful
Exactly.
webinar on
Yeah,
that.
exactly,
Yes.
exactly.
So I was the one who was also organized with him from the MBBS side.
Okay,
Yes,
okay,
you
okay.
just to
Great
add
to
a
see.
non-medical perspective, I'll just take a minute.
Yes, yes.
You know where the stigma starts when you go for any government aspect, or say you're going to apply for a document, you're asked to fill on your details. Simple thing like a registration form. So it'll ask you your name, then it asks you your gender, age, email address. That very question, gender, leads to the stigma. In we generally have male, female, and now there has been transgender after they have been accepted as a third gender. There should be a fourth option, wish not to tell, in terms of gender non-conforming. In the foreign countries, this option is that I do not want to conform with gender. So that the fourth aspect needs to come in. That very form itself builds the stigma in any aspect, not just doctors, at any level. It could be at a clerical level or any profession. That very form itself starts a stigma. So that needs to be addressed first, along with interventions being already taken, like sir said and you put on. That's all I want to add.
Yes. Thank you. So you're saying something?
no, carry on.
Okay. All
I
right,
would
so we'll
also
just
like to add one more thing. Like when we organized a pride in Gandhinagar, and it was first time in Gandhinagar, Gujarat, because I'm basically doing my PhD in Gujarat, Gandhinagar only. So it was the first pride in Gandhinagar, and people were literally, they were shocked. What is going on? Like we took a parade from a long route we took, and people came out of their homes and they were literally, what is going on? What is this? What are you people doing? It's like social stigma is still over there in people, like in mind of the people, that yeah, they don't exist. Or
yes, that is actually true. But with the current generation, I'm definitely assuring you there's a change. And like I said, I've also been a proactive member of. I've tried to be in a proactive. I don't know how much I am proactive, but of the LGBTQI rights and everything else. And I think definitely people will get more awareness and things will change quite. But it will take time. It will take some time, as everyone said, about communication, about being more empathetic and with better healthcare systems. Right? I'll just like to come back to the question because we're losing a lot of time. We can go on and on in the debate. So yes, I would just like after Neeraj sir's opinion, along with Ms. Nahida's opinion of what you think about it, about this question currently.
I think we
But-
should like, yeah.
Yes, please go on.
The like we should improve our healthcare system. We should be like health systems should be measured and report what matters most to the people, such as competent care, user experience, health outcomes, and confidence in the system. New research is like crucial. We should do the new research from like our low health quality system to the high quality health system. Improving our quality of care will require system wide action. It's like a high quality system is one that optimize healthcare in a given content by constantly delivering healthcare that improves and maintains health outcomes by being valued and trusted by all people, and they're responding to changing population needs. That's the thing. Thank you.
All right, thank you so much, ma'am. And we'll go on with Ms. Kavya. What are your opinions on this?
Yes, Yug. So I think I have a very different perspective from what all others shared, because I will not be comparing like COVID-19 and other issues. But within the pandemic only, I would like to say that if we move on to the initial stages of pandemic, from an Indian perspective, I would like to address this, that a lot of Indian leaders had actually promised COVID-19 testing and care for all those who need, regardless of income. But the treatment as were as stratified and unequal as the country itself, unfortunately. So from whatever I have read and observed, I think it's the very fact that we tend to sort of accept and ignore the fact that it is not equal, or it's unequitable or unaccessible. We tend to accommodate with get accommodated with that. So I would like to give an example. If I'm in Delhi right now, and if I want to go to a government hospital, I have this preconceived notion in me. Yeah, there are certain things that I'll be expecting from a government hospital. For example, if there are pan parak stains over there, it's something that I'll not be shocked about. I'll be expecting that it's there. Okay, and I'll be walking through the corridors. There'll be a bunch of people sleeping because they don't have their private beds, and they'll be in totally unhygienic conditions. So I will not mind. I'll be like, yes, it is like that. That's how it should be. Government hospitals aise hi hote. That's what I'll think. So I think that before even we address, before even we find a solution to equitable, accessible, and quality healthcare, we need to in fact realize, we need to begin by identifying and realizing that there is in fact a problem within the system which needs to be addressed, and put some emphasis upon that.
Yes, yes. I agree that we need to realize that where the problem lies, what are we looking at, and then
Exactly.
identify and go along with the problem as you're talking about, right?
Right. So I had
Although our recent hospital is an exception, our recent hospital is SVP, and it is the first choice hospital in Ahmedabad
yes,
to
sir,
get
I've been
treatment.
there. I was in Ahmedabad for a while. I've been there.
So such changes are needed much
Of course,
much
it's
much
far
more.
better. Right.
Yes. This is actually, yes, I think that even all over across India, governments are coming up with better hospitals. With even I've seen that in Ahmedabad, only the 6 hospitals we've had, they've drastically changed, improved from what they were in the earlier times, and they've been building better infrastructure, better quality healthcare, etc., etc., etc. Because we have a bigger budget, maybe from 1% to 3%, or maybe just because people demanded it, and then everyone realized that we needed a new hospital, etc., etc., everywhere. That is how the change in healthcare comes. So that
I
is it
want
with
to
this
add one
question.
more thing. Like
Yes.
here is in Gandhinagar is a civil hospital. I think that is far more better than the hospitals in Kashmir. Really, government hospitals in Kashmir. That civil hospital is far more better than those of the
Yes, in Gujarat, a lot of emphasis has been given in this aspect also to make the government hospital, especially medical colleges, quite good. Even if it is
Yeah.
government or even if we see civil hospital, especially the individual units, that is UN Mehta Cardiology or Kidney Hospital or Retinal Center, they are quite good. So that change need to come, I mean, in more and more states and more cities, and in remote area colleges as well.
Definitely.
We have in Kashmir we have only one like psychiatric hospital where the all the psychiatric problems only one hospital for that, and only one hospital for the these maternity women.
And that's
Only one.
why government, if somebody want to open say medical college or hospital in the remote area, the government welcomes like anything. And suppose one want to open any medical college in a city, it's such a difficult task. So from government side, it is being encouraged. I mean,
Definitely.
Kashmir or northeast.
And in Kashmir, like both the hospitals are in city, not in any remote area or like that. Both the
Yes.
hospitals are in Srinagar. LD
So
hospital
that,
is a major maternity hospital over there, only one maternity hospital, and that is in Srinagar. There is no other hospital like maternity hospital outskirts of the Srinagar or remote areas of Kashmir.
yes, these areas should be focused, definitely.
Definitely. Yes, we'll continue to discuss all of these aspects, but we should move on to the fourth question, I feel. So that is why, can we have the next question, please? After the views on all the panelists on this. Okay, so we have this question that what can we do now to tackle the lack of healthcare professionals as we have talked about in the world currently, and how do you see the future of healthcare affected by this pandemic also, and also the trends in healthcare 20 years from now, like 20 years, 30 years from now, and etc. So I'd like Ms. Nahida to go first.
Yeah. Like we should be like assure and educate local public health infrastructure that should be like maintaining the basic capacity foundation to well functioning public health system such as data analysis and utilization and health planning, partnership development, and community mobilization. I have wrote all the points, so I'll be like reading those points.
No, you can also express freely whatever you feel about these questions.
Yeah, exactly. We should also promote healthy communities, and healthy behavior means activities that improve health in population. For example, engaging communities to change policy system or environments to promote positive health or prevent adverse health, providing information and education about the healthy communities. We should also like we should we can say like from now onwards 20 years from now from 20 years from now, we should like be we should also concentrate on the health. Our major budget should be like there should be a good amount of budget good amount of like budget should be invested in the health sector. Most of the hospitals are like with more like there should be more hospitals, there should be more uh, community centers where the healthcare systems or healthcare centers should be there. We should also protect uh, like I don't know, I mean, like what should I say, it's like from 20 years from now, what will be the condition of like the healthcare system? It's like it's more unpredictable thing. What can you say about it? Yeah,
Yes,
thank
I'll just
you.
say that yes, we get it. It's very unpredictable right now. We don't even know what can happen.
And that too
Yes.
because of the COVID thing, it's really unpredictable because when we came from the it was like first wave is going to be like everything is fine after the first wave. Now the second wave is more like dangerous than the first wave. Like yesterday it was like 95,000 patients were in September. There was highest than the number per day. In September, most of the cases, positive cases, were in September. And now, yesterday, I got to know, like, I was just checking the COVID news, and it was 1 lakh something positive cases were there just the day before yesterday, I think. So it's like unpredictable thing what healthcare will look like in 20 years from now, but most probably it will look good. I hope so.
Yes, that's just what we want to hear, because we'll be the future healthcare professionals, me and everyone else around who's young, and I think definitely we'll make the health system better. I assure you
Actually,
that, and I
I'm not
definitely
I'm not like you people are all in those, I'm
no
into
no,
the
but
healthcare system, but yeah, I'm just I'm not I'm an international politics student, so I just I don't know, I had put my all efforts in that thing. I don't know whether I had given the justice or not.
no, it's alright. It's also good to hear what experiences you have had, what opinions you have had, and everything. And that's a really good thing that you have just participated in this as much as you can. And thank you so much. We'll move on with the next panelist. What would you like to say, Ms. Kadia?
Yeah. So I think I'll agree with Nahida that even I'm not from a health background, but I would like to. I personally believe that like other citizens, like I had mentioned that those who receive the healthcare are stigmatized, just like the healthcare providers are also stigmatized. It's not just one way, right? So especially during pandemic, we are seeing that a lot of healthcare providers are assaulted, abused, and ostracized, and they have even been asked to vacate their rented homes. So I think this is one major point, that why I think this is an indirect way of discouraging the upcoming generation to join the medical profession, right? So I think that firstly we need to work on investing, firstly sensitizing people about this, to not stigmatize. Secondly, we need to invest in training more healthcare workers who can provide compassionate preventative care. And I think I don't know, I may be factually wrong, but I think that people are more focused, at least my friends are more focused on being specialists more than generalists. So everyone wants to be a surgeon or pulmonologist or something like that. But I think maybe we can provide a tailor-made approach to the students. Like maybe some people can be general practitioners or nurses or caretakers or social workers or compassionate health coaches or whosoever. But I think instead of devaluing these sectors as well, I think we should start promoting them so that the students take more efforts to take in these courses, and they also feel that there's a wide, a very wide domain to be in. So of what from 20 years from now, I think So before Dr. Neeraj told us that, communication has become a part of healthcare, my answer was that technologically, yes, healthcare system is going to flourish. And AI, the artificial intelligence is also, there's a lot of debate on that AI would be a part of this. And I think in many regions it's a part, and that after 20 years, we'll be able to predict what disease is going to happen. So all those things, I think in that way it would flourish. But before Dr. Neeraj sir had told me about communication as a part, I was going to say that humanely healthcare sector would evolve. That's impossible. But now I've changed my mind. So I'd say that both humanely and technologically, I think that healthcare there should be a positive change in 20 years from now. So yes.
And what do you think will be the effect of the pandemic on this? That
I think pandemic has.
You talked about this balance and everything. What other else? What are the supposed infrastructure, quality, quantity, healthcare aspects of what will happen?
I think more than the material aspects, I would like to come in that pandemic has definitely acted like a mirror for all of us, the entire society, the entire world, of how self-centered and insensitive it can be to each other, saving its own life. So I think in that way, 20 years from now, I think we will reach in some other level in these aspects for sure. I think we already have. So
yes, that's really good. I'm just so glad that we could actually get a good mindset, and we could actually change the mindset that we had in this through this discussion. Even though if we couldn't think that this can change, that can change, but I'm just happy that you could have a change in mindset while interacting with the doctors and also being a part of this discussion. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
And yes. Thank you. So now we'll move on to the third panelist, Dr. Priyanka. What would you like to say?
Thank you so much, Yug, for this question. So I would very much agree with 2 points said by Kavya and Nahida. You mentioned that you may not necessarily be from a healthcare background, but you're a student of international politics, and Kavya is a student from a social science background. I personally have known Kavya for over 2 years. So there's a reason why in public health we say that health is political and health is also social, because without political commitment, the country's health cannot flourish. Whether you take an example of Gujarat, how Sir said, where there has been so much investment into developing hospitals, even states like Kerala, why could Kerala deal with Nipah so well? Why, if you go to a Goa primary healthcare center, you feel you have gone to a private hospital? Because there has been so much political commitment in these states to address the health needs. So health is very much political, and international political relations also definitely impact health. Whether it's meeting other leaders, you've seen our leader go to various countries and have talks about vaccines, about exports. I think the topic just goes on. So that is one aspect I would just like to bring forth. And how, coming back to the center of the question, which is how to tackle the lack of healthcare professionals. Now, there are a lot of causes because of this lack. Somewhere the number of medical graduates graduating may not necessarily be a lack based on may not necessarily be less based on the population of that area, but not many may be willing to serve in a particular area. That's why there could be a lack of professionals available in X number of area. So some of the solutions I think which could be taken is, firstly, there needs to be an option or probably an analysis into why there is a lack over there. Are there fewer medical colleges there? Like Sir said, probably open up a medical college in a rural area. Are there even if there are people, are there fewer people who are willing to serve there? And also we have to look at the statistics of what are the number of medical aspirants versus the number of seats. So in terms of our country's population, how many people look at a TV serial or a movie and say, okay, mera beta bhi doctor banega, engineer banega? But I don't think that every one beta or one beti gets a seat into a medical college, given various issues which I would not want to dwell into current in this webinar. But I think the number of seats need to be increased for not only undergraduation but also post graduation. This will take years. I don't even know if it will happen in 20 years, because I do understand there are financial cruxes, but that is one aspect which only needs to be looked at to tackle this dearth in, and also how to mitigate this burden of rural healthcare, like opening medical colleges or centers in these places, or giving support to organizations to address the health needs like MSF is doing in Northeast, etc. We need to value the support of these international humanitarian aid organizations. And what will healthcare look in 20 years from now? I definitely think it will look good. Like Kavya said, COVID has been a mirror, definitely. And there have been improvements in the Indian healthcare system. You look at any of the national health programs where they have started from and where they are today, there is a huge development. I will not say that we have done bad. There are countries, there are cities, there are areas where the health indicators have improved. You look at Tamil Nadu, you look at Kerala, you look at Goa. The health indicators are extremely good. In fact, they say Goa is the best place to be born. There are very few maternal deaths in Tamil Nadu. Kerala had dealt with Nipah so well, I think it could probably take a epidemic mitigation lesson for other states. So we need to learn from these states also that how their health infrastructure is so good and how come people here have such a healthy state. So I think if we even take those lessons, definitely we can improve the current health status. And given the lessons COVID has had and the new move of increasing the GDP, I think if those few ventures come in, definitely healthcare will look much better than what it is currently in the next 20 years. And it is at a current better stage than what we started out with. And hopefully it will progress further in the future also.
So if I think that if expenditure can increase from 3% of GDP to 6% of GDP, just considering even one aspect that has taken a huge portion of the GDP of vaccinating the whole nation, and not in India, but everywhere across the world, it's going a big chunk of the GDP will go 1 to 2% of the total budget to vaccination, etc., etc., and maybe 2-3% more to COVID, etc., and whatever testing you're doing,
Right.
treatment, etc.
Right.
So,
Right.
what do you
That
think that
stratification
suppose
needs to be there? Like all the money cannot go into one disease, which will also take time. We are still learning with our current lesson of pandemic. So I think we've learned with one chapter, but it will definitely happen.
But this is one interesting question that has popped in my mind, that if 1 year can change so much, can 5 years of the pandemic, if the pandemic stays, I wish that it does not stay, but if it stays, and can it bring about that 3% of GDP to maybe 15% of GDP improvement in the country's healthcare system, etc., and healthcare contribution of the budget and everything else?
I that depends on various factors, among how many people I even pay tax for that GDP to go. I think that is there, but definitely it could happen. It's been a mirror. I remember last year when we were just into April, May with the numbers bombarding like crazy. There was a news I read an article that Italy will not give ventilators to anyone above 60. So imagine if Italy had a dearth of ventilators. Imagine what will happen in a low and middle income country where there may not be enough ventilators at all. So definitely it's been an eye opener, not just for India, for the entire world. The best of economies were not prepared for COVID. A country like the United States also had issues, also had probably the CDC also gave out rules, but they were not prepared to deal with COVID, and they're still not probably mitigating the pandemic in the best way. Just because the numbers have gone down doesn't mean the response has been the best. So it was a learning experience for everyone, and we will learn, but what the numbers go in will only be dependent on how many people pay tax. And that's why healthcare needs to be responsible. People need to take it as a response that it is my response to my healthcare. Government cannot sit and do everything. The person should feel accountability. There's something called community engagement and empowerment. If I do not feel that my money is worth someone's health, then I don't think the government will ever be able to do anything. So we need to realize what are our responsibilities as citizens and contribute and pay that tax effectively, so that that tax actually goes into the GDP investment. And then we should probably take those steps as well. In the UK, everyone pays tax. That's why NHS is tax funded. When someone goes for a trip to the UK or is a citizen of the UK, they don't pay anything, and it just covers everything. That type of system where everyone pays tax should come in, and that will take a lot of years, definitely.
That is absolutely true, and we totally agree with your point. The power of community engagement and how people need to be proactively involved in their healthcare and taking care of the nation's healthcare in their own way. Right. Okay, so we'll move on to the last panelist, Dr. Neeraj sir. This is the last question. What will be your views regarding this whole scenario we have right now?
Well, as far as GDP part or that scene is concerned, I agree that there should be more money given to the health side, health sector. That should definitely happen. But as far as this question is concerned, that how to tackle the lack of healthcare professional in the world, some countries like India, they are really doing a great job. I mean, if you see how many courses and how many seats the India has opened up in the last 5 or last 3-4 years, It is unbelievable. I mean, some people are even saying कि अरे इतने सारे डॉक्टर बना दोगे कुछ वैल्यू नहीं रह जाएगी. So many dental colleges, so many medical colleges. So what government should do? I mean, if there are lack, they can open the seat. They are opening the seat. They are encouraging in the most remote areas. So many countries, or some countries like India, definitely they are tackling it or doing in the best possible way. And down the line, India will be a huge reservoir of best healthcare professional. There is no doubt about it. So, and then the countries like India, which are having such a manpower and such a well qualified manpower that will keep on increasing with time, they should be the source for other countries as well. And the young people, they should be ready to mobilize. And that part, I think, may not be. I really doubt, because when I meet young people, they are very particular about. Some are very obsessed with the city. उनको ऐसा लगता है जैसे वो सिटी के बिना वो अधूरे हैं और सिटी उनके बिना अधूरा है. I mean, city is not anything alive. कोई जिंदा चीज तो नहीं है ना वो. So, or they are having a particular choice for particular country. कि I will go to that country. Why? You go to the place where you can make a difference and impact can be felt. So in this direction, if our young population can go ahead, I will say is that there is a drop. एक अगर आपने वो poetry सुनी हो, there is a drop and it was very hesitant कि I will come from clouds where I will go in this whole world, I will be lost. But that drop becomes pearl, क्योंकि सीप में जाती है, मोती बनती है. तो यंग पीपल को भी यही सोचना चाहिए. जो एक हिंदी में एक पोएट्री है, लोग यूं ही हैं झिझकते सोचते, जब भी उनको छोड़ना पड़ता है घर, किंतु घर का छोड़ना अक्सर उन्हें बूंद लौ कुछ और ही देता है कर. तो हमारे यंग पीपल को भी समझना चाहिए, इफ दे आर नॉट एबल टू मोबिलाइज, देयर विल बी टोटली मिसमैच. Our city will be filled with so many doctors, and there is hardcore competition, cutthroat competition, and there will be the areas where there is no healthcare professionals. So here the duty of people comes. If they are making so many doctors, so many healthcare professionals, then they should be ready to mobilize in other areas within the country, as far as and also outside the countries, in other countries. So that point, that care should be taken. Otherwise, I am very hopeful. The kind of young population we are having, the kind of brilliant minds we are having, I think 20 years down the line, I see something very bright.
Yes, I totally agree. And sir, actually, seeing myself as a part of this generation, and everyone I've been with. And I think even Dr. Priyanka and Ms. Kavya are also quite young, under 30, and they've also gone into NGOs, into doing social services, into actually bringing about policy change and being part of process. And I would really like to appreciate them also and even Ms. Naila for also going into some other streams and also picking up something that they actually believe in can change their way and everything. So I think, sir, even the panelists we have, I think they are also proof of that. Young people will be mobilized. The young people will do everything they can, and also will bring about some of the other changes in the world with whatever skills and talents and interests they have. And that's why I see a brighter future for that. That is totally true. And so with that, I think we have come to the end of all the questions we've had and the discussion we've had. So we can have the next slide now. And I think so it's the time for the closing, and thank you. And it's been a wonderful discussion with all of your 4 panelists. So to give a vote of thanks to Lives for Literacy first for giving me for setting up this opportunity for making the Lives for Literacy Foundation and everyone, and also for giving this opportunity to all of us to talk about here and to share this discussion today on the WHO World Health Theme, and also to each one of our panelists, the esteemed panelists we had today, Dr. Neeraj sir, thank you. Dr. Priyanka, thank you so much. Ms. Kavya and Ms. Nahida, thank you so much. It was wonderful to have you. And yes, with that will also to all the panelists, all the attendees we had. I think that we had 10 or so attendees, and then they went out and and yes, can we have the next slide of?
Yug, do you have
Yes.
the feedback form? The feedback survey.
No, I just find it and just send it. Just a minute.
Okay, perfect. As Yug said, we would like to take this time to thank all the speakers coming from India especially, and for being here, for all the participants, and for having and creating such a productive conversation about the role of healthcare and the role it plays in our future world. So thank you to all the speakers. It's been a pleasure hearing your insights, sharing your views, and for having you part of the Lives for Literacy organization.
Thank you very much.
Thanks a lot.
Thanks a lot. Thank you, Yug, and the team of.
It was a great experience, and especially hearing the people from diverse background and fields. So really great.
Likewise. Thank you so much, Yug, especially for the opportunity, and team Lives for Literacy. And it was great interacting with all the other panelists and the attendees today. Thank you.
Yes. And actually, I think I'll just we'll just mail the feedback form to all of you and also to the panelists. I'll just find it and I'll just send it. Or